Welcome everyone to the immigration panel. We're very excited that you've come to join us. I do ask if you would just hold questions until each one of the panelists has an opportunity to just give you an overview of who they are, what they do, what they see as the most urgent concerns emerging in immigration. And after that, we're going to open it up to questions. We allow all of the time for you to ask your questions because you all have many questions. So, all of our panelists are available to give you their information. If something comes up, you don't get an opportunity to ask. They are happy to follow up with you. And I'm just going to introduce them briefly. To my left, we have Brian Lozano. Brian Lozano, from Wind of the Spirit. And Wind of the Spirit is an immigrant resource center. Their mission is to organize and empower the community for social change to achieve a world of solidarity, justice, and peace. Even though they're based in the Morris County area, they are available to travel. So that's really important for me to share. Also, we have attorney Daniel Abraham here with us as well. Since graduating from New York Law School, Attorney Abraham has been an adjunct law professor at New York Law School and is admitted to the bars of New York and New Jersey. His expertise covers commercial, contract, and workplace disputes, as well as all aspects of individual and corporate immigration issues. His wife, Rochelle Akiem Abraham, was here with us at the first session. She was not able to be here because she's doing a pro bono litigation on behalf of a juvenile, but he represents their firm very well and certainly is here to answer any questions, even if a follow-up is required. And then lastly, we have Valerio Gonzalez. He is an outreach director and paralegal focusing on tax law at Legal Services of New Jersey. Legal Services of New Jersey is a nonprofit organization that provides legal help and assistance to low-income New Jersey residents on civil matters. He has an educational background in psychology from Kean University. Let's give all our panelists a hand. And with that, we're just going to ask them each to share. I don't know if you need the mic, but
okay. Thank you.
Great.
All right. My name is Brian Lozano. I work with Wind of the Spirit Immigrant Resource Center in Morristown, New Jersey. Our main office is there. However, we do work across the state. We're focusing right now in Morristown, Dover, Madison, Plainfield, and Orange. So our organization is, we have 3 programs really. So our first program is our legal program, and we do everything from naturalization, legal permanent residencies, DACA, TPS, asylum cases. And our second program is our safety and health program. We're OSHA certified. We do OSHA 10 programs, OSHA 30 programs, where we help workers identify hazards at the workplace. We focus a lot on construction, although we are certified to teach in general industry. And this is used more so in New York than it is in New Jersey. In New York, you can't work in construction unless you have an OSHA 10 certification. So a lot of it's big out there. We do these at the correctional facilities, job agencies, and in churches that offer the program or that would like to help their community in the program. And lastly, which is our main focus and our main program, is our advocacy and community organizing. So we organize and advocate for immigrant rights and labor rights. We've had several victories. 3 of them off the top of my head are stopping the implementation of the 287G program in the Morristown area. 287G is a program where ICE contacts local authorities and they deputize local police officers so that they can ask for immigration status when pulling somebody over or when, talking to somebody. We were successful in not letting that be implemented. Our second very successful campaign was at the County College of Morris after September 11th. Internal, at CCM, they passed, I guess, a policy where if you couldn't prove that you were a documented student, then you would be charged an out-of-county tuition price, even if you had gone to an in-county high school. It took us 10 years to campaign, but we were successful with the help of the community. So that's another one. And then lastly, we've gained earned sick days in Morristown as part of our labor rights campaign. At the moment, we're focusing on passing fair and welcoming community policies throughout the state. Our focus is in Morris County, as I explained earlier. However, we're working with a coalition of immigration advocacy groups and legal groups such as the ACLU, AFSC, Make the Road New Jersey, Faith in New Jersey, and so on. And then lastly, and I didn't answer this the last panel, but I think that one of the main issues in our community at the moment is community involvement in getting the community to do something at the municipal and at the county level. I think it's pretty clear that we're not going to get anything from the federal, from the top coming down. So the only way that we can move is really at our municipal, county, and state level. But for that to be successful, the community needs to be engaged and involved, doing legislative visits, going to rallies, and this is a very grassroots approach. But I think that it's necessary. While immigration law is great and it's a response to the problems that are at the moment, the issue and how it's going to be fixed is in the political arena. And that goes beyond that. However, there are immigration lawyers who also work in the political arena and are for these kinds of changes. So I think that one of the main concerns, though, is that the community itself needs to get involved as much as possible. I understand the fears of the people who are undocumented because there is a possibility of them being detained and deported. But our community that, for example, were at some point undocumented, they should be involved, and our allies can get involved in doing these legislative outreaches and visits and lobbying and so on. And that's about it for Wind of the Spirit.
Hi everyone, my name is Valerio Gonzalez. I work with Legal Services of New Jersey.
Can everyone hear?
So yes, my name is Valerio and I work with Legal Services of New Jersey. So you may be more familiar with some of our subsidies, the more localized legal services around this area, Northeast and Northwest Legal Services. Those are more county-based legal services. But my organization in particular, we assist people throughout the state, regardless of county. We also assist people out of state as long as they are eligible for our services, as well as have a dispute within this state. I'm the outreach director. I go throughout the state of New Jersey and I give presentations. I inform people of our services. The reason why I'm interested in doing these immigration panels is because throughout my presentations I meet a lot of undocumented individuals who come to me with their fears regarding what's going on, and they also these people don't understand their rights. We see that a lot of our undocumented clients also are very taken advantage of in all various areas of the law. We have in family law cases, a lot of employment, uncollected wages. Basically, these people are being threatened to be reported to ICE, and they come to us with their fears. They don't know what to do. Again, they don't understand their rights. The projects that I'm involved with at LSNJ I'm part of two projects. I'm part of TLAP. We deal with tax law and matters with the IRS. As far as immigration matters, we help undocumented individuals get an ITIN number solely for filing for taxes to avoid any future problems or debts with the IRS. And the ITIN number could also have a lot of other beneficial benefits for them, such as being able to open up a bank account. And we also deal with individuals who are in the process of being naturalized but have debts with the IRS, therefore hindering the process of naturalization. The other project that I'm involved with is called LAMP. It's called Legal Aid for Medical Patients, and it's more hospital-based. They're located at the 4 major hospitals here in the state. So it's Cooper down in Camden, Jersey City Medical Center, St. Joseph's in Patterson, as well as Newark Beth Israel. So again, just to kind of reiterate, I do these presentations to let people know, regardless of their immigration status, that they can receive assistance from us as long as they're eligible. And we are pro bono. We assist people throughout the state.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Abraham. Thanks for having us all here today. I'm an immigration attorney. My partner in business and life is my wife, Rochelle, who was here this morning, but she had to run off to court this afternoon. We have offices in Morris County, New Jersey, and Midtown Manhattan. We're a full-service immigration practice. I'm gonna list off some of the big ticket items, areas where we tend to do a lot of practice, but we really full service, and there are a lot of little pieces in between all of these that we would also touch upon. We do a lot of family-based petitions, 601A waivers. We have a lot of cases in detention and removal proceedings. We litigate in the immigration courts and in appeals. We do a lot of asylum applications, and with those asylum applications, usually making claims under the Convention Against Torture for people who qualify. We do U visas for people who have been victims of crimes, is another avenue of relief for those people. Cancellation of removal, also known as El Ley de los 10 Años, you've probably heard of. Corporate sponsorships, H-1B visas, L-1s, really a full-service immigration practice. On the pro bono side, we usually have going a few cases at the same time, and we've got some going now. We're always interested to hear if you've got an individual or a client with no resources who has a compelling case. We'll do pro bono services on asylum claims. We have a few active SIJ cases. You may have heard of special immigrant juvenile status cases for juveniles coming to this country undocumented. Something we've gotten into more recently is, well, we have a lot of people coming to us who are green card holders, legal permanent residents who want to become citizens, who want to go through the naturalization process. Given the current political climate and the new presidential administration, people are more interested in doing that now than we've seen them in before. Another thing that we're getting into recently is collections cases. And this is where my corporate commercial litigation background kind of merges with the immigration practice. Is we're seeing more and more clients coming in because they've been fleeced by their former attorney, where they'll hand over, $5,000, $7,000. 6 months go by, 9 months go by, 12 months go by, nothing's happened. Haven't heard anything. What's going on with my case? And all they hear are the crickets chirping. It's unpopular in my profession to go after attorneys, but my wife will tell you, she's not here, I'm famous for making unpopular decisions, and we've been going after them and trying to repatriate some of those funds for our clients who have been taken advantage of, knowing full well that the attorneys who do this, in all likelihood, either don't have the experience and expertise to be practicing immigration, it's just a hot area right now, so they jump into it, or knowing that the people who are coming for help are living in the shadows, and there's really no chance of them going after these attorneys to get their money back. In either case, it's an extraordinarily vulnerable population group, and one that we take very seriously. So collections is a new area that we've gotten into recently. In terms of, we were asked what we see, what we're gonna see going forward as some big issues. And I think the reality is that right now there's far more that we don't know than what we do know, because it's a new administration. Based on changes that we've been seeing them make recently, what we do know is that the priorities are changing. People who used to be what's called a priority 3 for removal, somebody that might have some kind of a charge against them, something that we would consider fairly minor, like a disorderly conduct, or some other infraction that's more like a traffic violation than what we would see as a typical criminal violation. Those people used to be in priority 3 status. That's the lowest priority status that there is, that there was under the Obama administration. ICE wasn't going after these people. What we're seeing now is that these people, if there's a final order of removal, they're getting targeted, picked up, and detained with orders of deportation for them to be removed from the country. So some of the cases we're getting in now are families coming to us asking, what can we do for those people? Is there anything left to do? The short answer is there's one thing we can do. I'd be happy to answer questions if people have anyone in that situation that they've heard of. But that's in a nutshell who we are and what we do.
Thank you. So this is your opportunity to ask questions to the panel, and I just ask you be respectful of time. We don't have very much time left, but if you would just ask one question. I want to avoid a lot of follow-up because then everyone doesn't get to ask their questions. Yes.
So I'm from the Meadowlands Family Success Center, and we have 3 undocumented Venezuelan immigrants that they just came because they asked where they could possibly find work, and they had applied for working papers, but I can't really refer them anywhere. So I was just wondering, how can I go about giving them a resource where they can find job placement?
They're undocumented?
Yes.
Have they, so the question is, what can undocumented workers do to get work authorization?
Or just to get work in general.
What,
They apply for work authorization, but what can they do to get work?
so this might be better for one, so we don't do for work placement. We would be, so the place where our firm would be involved would be in, if somebody files an asylum application, or if we file for them, one of the things that we would do together with the asylum application is an application for work authorization. When that authorization comes through, then they'd get a work authorization card, and then technically could work legally using that card. But in terms of job placement, we're not doing that. I wonder if one of you guys might be better.
This is how any other immigrant would go about it. And I mean, a lot of labor, manual labor, job agencies, and the problem with that is that they're often taken advantage of, often paid under minimum wage, and often overtime is not paid, and overworked. Unfortunately, that's the situation we're at right now.
We do have employment attorneys with us that I can be quite happy to refer you over to them. So maybe they can speak with them regarding that matter.
But just as a follow-up to that question, I want to make sure I'm clear. They're here undocumented?
So they are here on political asylum, from what they told me, but they apply for work authorization. But again, this is what I'm just going off the information they told me, that it's going to take them a couple months in order to just get the papers, and they're telling me they have bills and et cetera, and there's not really much I can do. So I just figured that out.
There isn't much you can do, and until they are authorized to work, they should not be working.
No, that was the point.
And they should also know that if they're engaging in unauthorized work, it could be harmful to the ultimate relief that they're seeking. So they don't want to do anything that's going to undermine the process. And we realize that these people are caught they're really caught in a catch-22, right? They need to work, they want to work, but they can't work. And it's one of those difficult, it's a counseling question, I think, and maybe a social services question for you folks of how to deal with it. We're on our end pushing as hard as we can when we submit those employment authorization applications in conjunction with an asylum application, as hard as we possibly can to get those back. But there's a certain point where our hands are tied. We're waiting for the government to respond, and they're overloaded.
Just have a question here.
So with our Family Success Center, we see a lot of immigrants from Central America coming, trying to escape gang violence, especially right now, because Central America is a very dangerous place to be in right now. So what are the criteria for those escaping specifically gang violence or have fear that their families are in danger there? What are the criteria for asylum? I believe they would apply for, right?
Yeah. So a large part of our, I'd say probably 80 to 90% of our client base is Latino, and they're from Central America, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and some Mexico as well. The gang cases that we're seeing are they're difficult cases. Everyone's been persecuted by La Mara, 18, right? 13. I mean, they're Salvatrucha. We see them all over Latin America, and when people are coming, they want to file their asylum claims. They have to have been persecuted. They have to have been. I mean, there's a bunch of criteria, so I'm reluctant to try to list them all off in a comprehensive fashion. But to give you a general idea, they have to have been persecuted in their country of origin, and the government has to have been unable or unwilling to protect them. Or we've seen cases where the government is actually complicit in the persecution. Okay, so it becomes unsafe for the individual to return. And you know, if you wanted to touch base offline, I'd be happy to go through a more robust explanation of all the criteria. It's not a simple 1, 2, 3. It's very fact specific, and it ranges from political asylum to having your speech quelled by the government, to being persecuted or threatened with harm in some way or physically harmed. And the cases we've seen range from people where the Maras have murdered family members, extorted family members, and they're in league with the government, and the police are receiving payoffs and are unable to help. I mean, but it's a very fact-specific claim.
So you have to have tangible evidence that this is going on.
Well, we have to have evidence, and I'd say I would back off a little bit from the word tangible, in that a lot of times in this case, the government understands that the only evidence there is going to be the word of mouth of the person seeking the relief, right? And a lot of times to get those affidavits from the family members who are still back in El Salvador is difficult, because court documents are public. And the Maras, their arms are far-reaching, and they find ways of getting hold of these, so the family members are reluctant to do an affidavit or testify telephonically, although we have it done, from El Salvador or any of these countries. I'm using that as an example, because they're afraid of reprisal. So the courts know, the judges know, that oftentimes the only evidence that we have is the testimony of the individual here in the United States seeking the relief. We always try to get corroborating evidence of an affidavit or testimony from somebody abroad. In a lot of these cases, unfortunately, the tangible evidence that we see are scars, physical scars on their person. Or we have a guy who was forcibly tattooed by La Mara. He was branded. But those are the kinds of things. Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a place that you can point to just so that people can get oriented to what the risks actually are? Because we've noticed in our area, at least, we also have a lot of like Central American people in our area that we're serving, and a lot of them are just scared to show up to anything at this point, and so they're not able to kind of get oriented to kind of the new situation, things like that. Is there any place that you can send them, or people that could come to the community and just do just a very natural language, half hour, here's what's happening right now. It doesn't mean you can't send your kids to school and things like that?
Sure.
So, sorry, I'm certainly not trying to monopolize. That's something that my firm does,
Okay.
and we do it for free.
Okay.
We go to, as a practice philosophy, we go to churches, we'll go to synagogues, we'll go to mosques, we don't care. We'll go to a place that you designate as a safe place. We'll come to your place of work, if that's where you want us to come. And we will do the presentation. We typically will put on about a 40-minute presentation surrounded by these topics that I'm discussing now. Avenues of relief. We do a section on know your rights. Do you have to answer the door if ICE is knocking without a warrant, right? And we will do a Q&A afterwards privately with each individual that comes. It's part of what we do. And we will do it in both English and in Spanish. So
And I know Brian, both you and Valerio do similar things, so.
So we have we offer Know Your Rights workshops, which are usually more than just Know Your Rights. We usually go through a historical context of immigration, then we go into Know Your Rights, and then we do a follow-up with an emergency plan, so like a power of attorney clinic, and a bunch of other things. But yeah, we for the most part, we do these at churches, so if you know, usually these are places where our communities, our Latin American communities are, you know, they trust their pastors and that community, so they're more likely to go to a church event, and so we host them there. Ours are usually about 2 hours, and yeah, so I feel, I'll give you a card if you want to reach out.
And as far as my presentations, I mean, I really can't advise outside of the other areas of law besides my project, but what I normally do is I just make the information, because I present to a lot of Spanish speakers, and that's where a lot of the undocumented people come in. Normally my presentations are very general. I'll be like, hey, you know, I might not be able to advise on the immigration matters, but here's this department, it's available to you. Any information, any questions they may ask, you know, you're more than welcome to talk to an attorney. So as far as the other departments, like, you know, family law, landlord, tenant, things like that. Again, I cannot advise on, but I do let the clients know that this information is available to them.
This question here, then this and that. Well, this one here first, I'm sorry.
Hi, do you have any suggestions for undocumented families that already started the process to become documented? And they have received a letter stating that the request was denied, but now they are receiving a second letter asking them to show up in their building? And they are scared, they don't want to show up? Immigration Services Office.
This is a tough one.
I'm sorry.
It's a, it's a real problem. So I think the right answer is it depends on the circumstances. Depends on what kind of claim they made for to adjust their status, why the claim was denied. Are there any rights of appeal? Has there been an order of removal issued by the immigration judge? Is there an opportunity to make a motion to reopen? I mean, it's so fact specific that it's very difficult to give you a one-size-fits-all answer. We certainly, if they've been ordered to appear, to report, and we've seen this with orders of supervision, where someone's been ordered removed, but their removal has been stayed by ICE, ERO, and they're here pursuant to a stay, but there's an existing order of removal. A lot of times what happens is they're required to report in on some kind of a regular basis. What we used to see under the Obama administration was that people were reporting in every 6 months, every 12 months. What we're seeing now is that time period is being shortened. People are being required to report in every 3 months, once a month, once a week. And that when they're reporting in, if there's a final order of removal, and especially if there's any kind of a criminal history, they're being detained. So you have people who, and we've got 2 clients like this right now, who reported in every time just as they were supposed to, and they've reported in 6 times, 8 times, showed up at the time in the place designated, and they're required to show up with their passport every time that they report in, and they are taken immediately into custody, and then we get a phone call from the family saying, what can we do? I can't tell your families don't report in. Legally, if they're required to report in, they have to report in. But what we're seeing with some of these people, again, if there's a final order of removal that's been issued, and particularly if there's any kind of a criminal history, and I mean, a DWI. We've got a client right now who's been here 15 years. He's paid his taxes for 15 years under a TIN. He's the manager of a construction company. He's married. He's got 2 children. His younger son is disabled severely. He is the primary breadwinner for the family. He has 1 disorderly conduct violation. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah. If you go out on your street corner and you scream too loud, or maybe say a few curse words and a police is there, you could get a disorderly conduct, okay? I'm not condoning that conduct, but It used to be that that wasn't a priority. This individual has a disorder, one single disorderly, he's never even had a traffic ticket in 15 years. He went in to report for his mandatory supervision and was detained. Yeah.
This question, sorry, I think it was you, and then it's here, and then we're back here.
Okay, so they're in the community where I reside and also assist families. They're very low income, and some documentation they want to do on their own, or they go to these certain notary houses or little bodegas that have a side job in the back that do papers. What are some of the papers that can be done from, on their own? And what are papers that cannot be done? So, for example, translation of documents. Right now, there's a specific paper that, gives like permission in case they're detained for someone else to care for their children. What documents can be done by the families and what cannot be done?
It's another great question. I mean, so look, here's what we're seeing a lot of. I mentioned when I first stood up and started telling you about what we do, the last thing I told you that we've been doing more and more of is collections. And what we're doing is when we have a client that comes in and says, hey, I gave so-and-so attorney or so-and-so notario, or I gave them $5,000 and I don't know what's happening. They haven't done anything. We're seeing more and more of that. The immigration is a very unique area from an attorney's perspective, because it's an area where you don't have to be an attorney to do some of the paperwork that's required to file some of these applications. You can be an authorized representative, or there's a name for it, an accredited or authorized immigration representative. Notaries typically witness documents. They swear that somebody signing a document is the person who signed it, and at the time and place that they signed it. I can't. Just another one where I can't give you a one-size-fits-all. What can they do and what can't they do? I mean, I think it's probably a subject of a whole 90-minute lecture. But what we always recommend is you should have an attorney reviewing what you're doing. There are a lot of great organizations. There's Kind. There's Legal Aid. I do a lot of pro bono work with Safe Passage in New York. There are great organizations that can do some of these services without charging for people who don't have the resources, but they have to be very, very careful. We're seeing more and more people engaged in the unauthorized practice of law today, and that's not just civil penalties. That's criminal penalty. That's a crime to practice law without a license. And when they need to know what the line is, not the families, but the notaries. They need to know what line it is they're not supposed to cross. And the families really are in the best position to police it through people like you, to tell you what's going on, so that you can do background investigation, or you can call me or some other attorney to look into and see, is this person accredited? Do they have a license to practice law? More and more, we're recommending that people do their own diligence and find out what accreditations do people have. If they're an attorney, you can go to njcourts.gov if they claim to be an attorney in New Jersey, njcourts.gov, and you can go to the attorney portal, plug in their name, and it'll spit out their bar number. And if they're licensed to practice law, if they're not, it won't be there, and that'll tell you that's a problem. We've had attorneys that we've gotten cases from, and I'll go look them up, and they're disbarred, or they're ineligible in New Jersey, or they're otherwise suspended or being sanctioned, and they're still representing people. And I have to believe that the same thing is going on with notaries going, and because we've taken cases from notaries who were clearly engaged in the practice of law but shouldn't have been. So I think it's a great question. It's something to be mindful of, but I think it requires a little bit of due diligence on the family's part, and for them to be open about it so that you can get the right answers. Yeah.
Brian, I know you recommended a website as well.
It's just that so usually the people who can represent them, represent other people in immigration court who are not lawyers are BIA reps. They're accredited by the Bureau of Immigration Appeals. And to see if an organization has that accreditation, you can look on the uscis.gov website. Wind of the Spirit is on there. We are BIA accredited. We also have immigration attorneys. But there are other organizations throughout the state of New Jersey who are accredited also.
This one, and then we'll come over to you.
Okay. What advice should we give to undocumented homeowners? They are afraid that if they get subject of a raid, what should they do ahead of before they're exposed, to any raid, to secure their house?
If they're homeowners?
Yes.
So there are things that they can do. The power of attorney is probably the quickest, most efficient, and most cost-effective thing for them to do. It's a simple form, usually ranges from 1 to 3 pages, give or take, depending on what it is that it's designed to cover. Let me take one step back, and then I'll get more into the power of attorney. What we're recommending is that people have a contingency plan. Mm-hmm. That you have your families, people that come to you for help, to have some kind of an action plan, so that if dad doesn't come home from work one day, mom knows who to call. Or if mom and dad both don't come home, the kids know who to call. Or the relatives or the next door neighbors, that there's some kind of plan in place so that the family knows who they can get in contact with if somebody gets detained. The power of attorney, typically what it does is it gives somebody else the power, it's called an attorney in fact, to make decisions about your assets, your finances, your business. So it's, again, and this is another place where I think we could potentially see problems like raised by your question is, this power of attorney is a legal document. My view is it should be drafted by an attorney. Mm-hmm. And the people should consult with an attorney because it's going to be tailored to their needs, rather than have it be a page that's downloaded off the internet, mm-hmm. where it's a fill in the blank that might not cover everything that needs to be covered. The first thing that comes to mind is a power of attorney. And that would give a friend or a relative the authority to make decisions about selling a home, renting a home, things of that nature. Yeah.
I just want to follow up that the first thing they could do is just know their rights, right? If you're talking about immigration raids, if they don't have a search warrant that's signed by like a judge or anything, or isn't specific, they should know how to be able to identify what's missing and their rights as far as ICE entering their property. So that, and then also a contingency plan, which is super important.
This question, and then the one in the back.
Okay. Like 3 quick questions. I
Can you
need
just do
for you.
one, though?
Well, it's really like quick. I'm from the East Orange Family Success Center. We have clients from Haiti, Guyana, Jamaica, Honduras, the Caribbean, and we're seeing an insurgence of immigration issues. So I would like for you to tell me what ICE stands for. I would like for you to define immigrant. And then I would like to know, as an employee for the Family Success Center, because we have issues with work, are we legally putting ourselves in a bind helping immigrants who are undocumented find work? Because our job is to help service them in any way that they may ask. And I just thought about it because they're very afraid. So I have some hiding, I have some moving with people. And I wanted to know, as an employee and as an agency, legally, is there some concern?
So ICE is Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. That's all and so they're under DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which is split into ICE and then Border Patrol, which you will find at airports and the border, our southern border. So that's what ICE is. So ICE carries out, the raids, or if they're looking for somebody who has a criminal record and they have a deportation order, they'll go looking for that person. Immigrants are, immigrants. There are 41 million immigrants in this country. 30 million of them are documented, have some kind of documentation, so they're allowed to be here, and about 11 million are undocumented, which is that they are not authorized to be here. So that's that, and then the last part, I think.
I was hoping you would answer that one. Listen, this is an employment law question, and we're not an employment law firm. I think the best practice on this would be to consult with an employment law attorney to get a really good handle on next steps and where you should be with advising people on finding work if they're undocumented and don't have work authorization. My knee-jerk reaction to the question is, if somebody does not have work authorization, they shouldn't be working. As much as I want them to be working, and they need to be working, any claim that they have for relief to adjust their status to be will come to your place of work, if that's where you want us to come. And we will do the presentation. We typically will put on about a 40-minute presentation surrounded by these topics that I'm discussing now. Avenues of relief. We do a section on know your rights. Do you have to answer the door if ICE is knocking without a warrant, right? And we will do a Q&A afterwards privately with each individual that comes. It's part of what we do. And we will do it in both English and in Spanish.
And I know Brian, both you and Valerio do similar things, so.
So we have we offer Know Your Rights workshops, which are usually more than just Know Your Rights. We usually go through a historical context of immigration, then we went to Know Your Rights, and then we do a follow-up with an emergency plan. So like a power of attorney clinic, and a bunch of other things. But yeah, we for the most part, we do these at churches. So if usually these are places where our communities, our Latin American communities are, they trust their pastors and that community. So they're more likely to go to a church event. And so we host them there. Ours are usually about 2 hours. So I'll give you a card if you want to chat.
And as far as my presentations, I really can't advise outside of the other areas. To you, any information and questions they may ask, you're more than welcome to talk to an attorney. So as far as the other departments, like family law, landlord tenant, things like that, again, I cannot advise on, but I do let the clients know that this information is available to them.
This question here, then this thing. Well, this one here first, I'm sorry.
Hi, do you have any suggestions for undocumented families that already started the process to become documented? And they have received a letter stating that the request was denied, but now they are receiving a second letter asking them to show up in their building? And they are scared, they don't want to show up.
To show up where?
Immigration service.
It depends on the circumstances. Depends on what kind of claim they made for to adjust their status, why the claim was denied. Are there any rights of appeal? Has there been an order of removal issued by the immigration judge? Is there an opportunity to make a motion to reopen? It's so fact specific that it's very difficult to give you a one-size-fits-all answer. We certainly, if has been stayed by ICE ERO, and they're here pursuant to a stay, but there's an existing order of removal, a lot of times what happens is they're required to report in on some kind of when they're reporting in, if there's a final order of removal, and especially if there's any kind of a criminal history, they're being detained. So you have people who, and they're required to show up with their passport every time that they report in, and they are taken immediately into custody, and then we get a phone call from the family saying, what can we do? I can't tell you, he's married, he's got 2 children, his younger son is disabled severely. He is the primary breadwinner for the family. He has one disorderly conduct violation. This individual has a one single disorderly, he's never even had a traffic ticket in 15 years. He went in to report for his mandatory supervision and was detained. Great question. I mean, here's what we're seeing a lot of. I mentioned when I first stood up and started telling you about what we do. The last thing I told you that we've been doing more and more of is collections. And what we're doing is when we have a client that comes in, it's a unique area from an attorney's perspective, because it's an area where you don't have to be an attorney to do some of the paperwork, but I think it requires a little bit of due diligence on the family's part, and for them to be open about it so that you can get the right answer.
Thank you.
Until they can do something else or gain status to work. That my question is, how can I advise them to? in that part?
I think it's a tricky thing for you to advise them on.
Right, right.
I mean, my recommendation is that the advice that you're asking about giving is starting to look and sound like legal advice. And once you step over that line, and it's not always clear where it is, sometimes the line's kind of fuzzy, and you stepped over it, and you don't even know it till you look back and you're like, oh no, I just stepped over the line. It's starting to sound like a legal question.
Right.
And it's, what people do is, as a practical matter, is if they're not a U.S. citizen, they get an I-10, they get a tax ID number, and they pay their taxes even though they're not here documented. We have some people coming over, I mean, for different reasons. On the business side, we have investors coming over, and we get them TIN numbers so they can pay their business taxes. But I think the right answer is consult with an attorney. Don't feel the onus or the responsibility that you need to provide the right answer if you're not sure. Give us a call or give these guys a call. They'll get you in the hands of someone who can answer the question.
I want to add a little bit more to the I-10, because a lot of the clients that I meet for I-10 numbers, I think they have the misconception that just because they're undocumented, they don't have to pay taxes, but really everybody, whether you're documented or not, you have an obligation to file for taxes if you make over a certain amount of money every year. So right now the threshold is $10,300, so if you make over that and the IRS finds out that you're working and you're not paying your taxes, whether you're documented or not, you're going to have a debt on your hands. So that's really the purpose of the I-10 number, just so you can file for taxes. And as I said, there's other benefits to it, like you're going to put up a bank account that could be very helpful to them. Working on a power of attorney case right now for a deceased client. So what we're trying to do is get the deceased client an I-10 number, and then that way we can, because the deceased client was undocumented. This is for an estate matter. But again, whether people are undocumented or not, they make over a certain amount of money, they have to pay their taxes, whether they're documented or not.
And let me say, we as law practitioners and people in the legal community, I think all of us are well aware of the tension created by the reality that they're undocumented and they got to get a TIN to pay taxes, but they're undocumented, so they want to stay off the radar of the government. That's a real issue. That is a real issue, and it's a personal decision. It's a family decision. We advise them on what the law requires them to do. But people are doing what they're doing. I mean, and what I can tell you is that by the time we get the cases always look a lot better. It's much easier for us to be advocates if the person is paying taxes and otherwise doing what they're legally required to be doing in the community, even though it puts them at risk.
Thank you.
Yes.
Quick question back to what we were talking about getting, basically giving someone else custody of their children. So is that something, so when a family come into, I'm from DCPMP, so when families come into one of the community organizations, is that a recommendation that they should have that conversation with them about, are the children citizens here? Should you already look into someone to turn over your custody to? Because we have gotten a large influx of families, specifically from Guatemala, in recent weeks. So, we're trying our best to help them, and we're reaching out to our community resources to be able to help them, but, they're all undocumented. They're doing their reporting, so I'm not really sure if that conversation should be held with them as soon as they're involved with one of the community agencies about, signing their child over to someone else as a precaution. Is that something you recommend?
I mean, I would recommend in this political climate that, yeah, that's immediately. I mean, when I do my Know Your Right workshops, that's the last part is, contingency plan and how do you make one? And that's the recommendation. Get a power of attorney. If you have a friend, family member who is a legal permanent resident or a citizen, see if you can, if they'll do the power of attorney with you for their children.
So I think it's 1, 2, 3.
Can I just add something to that real quick?
Yes.
Just as a point of, so on the power of attorney, if we ever draft a power of attorney, meaning my firm, we always make them revocable, okay? So that at any point the parent wants to revoke it, they do a revocation in writing and it's done, okay? What I want to be careful about though is using the word custody of the children, because the power of attorney does not grant custody. The power of attorney, and typically power of attorney is used in immigration. I think this is kind of a new phenomenon that we're seeing the power of attorney come up. Usually it's used, you give someone else power of attorney to make decisions about your assets and your finances.
Right.
If I'm going to a real estate closing and my client doesn't want to show up when he's buying a house, client will give me power of attorney to sign the mortgage documents. Okay, I'm making a decision about finances and the home, right? It will not confer custody. What it will allow a parent to do, if it's enforced, is designate another individual to make decisions about medical, health, food, basic living needs. But it will not grant custody. It will not grant guardianship. And as far as I know, we're not clear in New Jersey on what courts are going to do with these standby powers of attorney, how they're going to be enforced, if they're going to be enforced as they're written. Because it's a new phenomenon in the immigration context with children. We don't know what they're going to do with them. But it won't be custody. That's a separate
That's our rule.
and I know you know that, but I wanted to just make sure that I said it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So with kinship, we service families, like caregivers who are taking care of their relative. So now the question is, we do the paperwork to do legal guardianship, kinship legal guardianship. Now, would we be able to provide services to immigrant families that don't have a social security? When we do file for petition, it does tell us to state like their social security number and things like that. What would you recommend for us, like to leave that blank, or are we not allowed to do legal guardianship for immigrant families?
I got to kick the can on this one, because my partner Rochelle is the one who would deal with this, and I don't want to give you any misinformation. My sense is that it's the right thing to ask the question,
Right.
and we need to get you an answer. If you want to call my office, we'll put you in touch with Rochelle.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just had a question about the whole thing with the kids, like if the parents get deported and then the kids end up staying here because they're legally here. Are those parents allowed to like ask for their children to get sent back to their countries, especially when they're younger children? Maybe they probably go to like a foster home or a family. Will they be able to like get their kids back?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't had to deal with it yet, so we haven't actually gone through the process of doing it to know definitively one way or the other. My instinct is yes, of course, the children will be able to read. But this is part of the contingency plan. You know, this is part of the action plan. Do the U.S. citizen children have passports? That question came up in the session that we did earlier this morning. If they don't have passports, probably a good idea to get them passports so that they can travel. Part of the contingency plan would be to make whoever the person is that you're going to entrust with the lives of your children aware of a way to, provide to get to them financially, to have somebody travel with them. Those are all the kinds of things that would go into the action plan. Yeah.
There was a third question back. That was you?
Technically, I don't have a question. I just had a response
Oh.
to. I've had families who have gotten their kids brought to them in their countries, either through DCPMP or through the courts.
Okay.
But they have gotten their children back into their custody. And I have had parents who have signed over custody to another parent within that country.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
I just wanted to know an approximate price range for power of attorneys, because a lot of our families are low income. What is the approximate range as far as the power of attorney? Like, how much do they cost?
So we have our clinics, we do them free for members, but if they're not members, we do them for $25. I mean, but that ranges with notaries and lawyers or attorneys, yeah, so.
I am sorry, this is the end of our workshop. We went over a little, but Fabricio does have evaluations for you. We really appreciate if you would give our workshop family support.
Hey, so quick question. So even if somebody's disbarred, it's looked down upon to like call them out on them? No, I don't think so. At that point. So it's just like looked down upon if you call them out, if they're not disbarred, but they don't have experience practically.
Please do fill out the evaluations.
Yes, for sure.
Possibly doing future workshops.